over the last month, grain markets have witnessed a mini rally before falling back largely to where they were a month ago. Over the next sort of few minutes, I'm going to be taking through what's been behind that rally and why things have moved back again, and then move on to look at some of the things to keep an eye out for and look at over the coming weeks. This is going to be primarily focused on grain markets and looking through at what's happened to the prices from a UK perspective. From the end of, the last market update in early March, prices then proceeded to go on a mini rally. The new crop futures for the UK, so not 2015 prices, rose up to £134 per tonne. But we've since largely lost much of that and back to where we were sort of similar to nearly a month ago. What was behind that increase? Two things really. It was a series of new crop concerns coming in, people looking at some dry weather issues in the US, how would that affect winter wheat crops as they emerge from dormancy, but also some currency movements. That's really been a big thing for markets since the start of 2015 really. And the big theme has been the weakness of the euro, weakening of the euro relative to both the dollar and pound. Through mid to late March, we saw a slight recovery in the euro relative to both of those currencies, and that helped to support prices from a UK perspective slightly. However, since the start of April, we've seen markets turn again and retreat back down again. Two things largely behind that. One was the fundamentals coming back in, this reassertion that actually the stocks that are there are actually pretty large, and part of that was the US quarterly grain stocks report that came out on the 31st of March. That showed that despite some higher ethanol usage in the US maize stocks were still historically strong, and that really just sort of weighed on prices, taking the feed grain base down and so wheat prices with it. There was also a further strengthening in the US dollar, which much of the rest of the world trading in dollars, that then put pressure on grain prices as a whole. So where are we now? We are in a market that is increasingly focused on new crop. The remaining old crop drivers are dwindling. They're largely now around export pace and what stocks will be carried over to provide some cushion for the new crop or not. We're increasingly comfortable that, and the forecasts seem increasingly confident that there will be large stocks carried over. Now that's going to provide quite a cushion to any weather events that should occur during 2015 or issues with the 2015 crops. However, they won't compensate completely, and so it's only a partial cushion, and we are still going to be reliant to a large extent on the conditions for the 2015 crop and those harvests. As we're starting to head back now into quite a weather-driven market. Prices responding to changing new crop conditions, changing weather reports. How are the crops for the spring crops for 2015 being planted? Are they going in fine? What areas are going in? And what are those crops looking like? We're expecting a smaller but still historically strong US maize area. The key feature now will be, are conditions favourable to increase that area being potentially larger than people expected or smaller as the planting season progresses. If plantings are slower than average, it favours more area switching into soybeans, whereas a relatively strong start for them would support potentially the maize area that farmers are intending to plant, or potentially increasing that. In Europe, there's been some lower than average rainfall over the past couple of weeks, but it's still relatively early days. One of the big unknowns is what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. The political situation remains uncertain, and that then impacts onto the potential crop situation as well. So in addition to the usual weather worries, we also have this political uncertainty weighing forward as well. So to sum up, the sort of key things to keep an eye on over the next few weeks will be how Northern Hemisphere new crop plantings are progressing. We're getting data on Canadian planting intentions in a few weeks. And then all of that is building to the sort of first supply and demand estimates from the major forecasters, the IGC, International Grains Council, and US Department of Agriculture. These forecasts, which will come out at the end of this month and on the 12th of May, really give the first sort of market expectations of what supply and demand in 2015 will look like. And for that reason, they're often treated as an important benchmark. So we're in a market that is increasingly new crop focused, weather driven, and now building forward. There is still a lot of uncertainty as to what will happen in the coming year. So I'd suggest looking to hgca.com/markets or subscribing to the Grain Market Daily to keep abreast of these developments as they happen.